Hey, it's David Hooper, Build a Big Podcast, and this is the second day of my live Build a Big Podcast from Podcast Movement in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I want to tell you a story. My wife is a fashion photographer, and a lot of the shoots are done at my house. So we've got models coming over all the time, and they look different when they come. And when you see the raw photos, than they do after they've had makeup applied, and not only makeup applied to them, but the photos have been touched up, and everything has Photoshop magic to make them look their best. And we could argue whether we're actually making them look their best and maybe setting unrealistic expectations. But one of the things that I will tell you is that seeing this from, I guess, watching sausage get made, if you want to call it that, seeing it from the back end, it's actually going to make you feel better about yourself, because you look at these people and they come in and they're skinny and they don't have any fat on them and they've got high cheekbones and they're beautiful and they're still being touched up. And I heard yesterday's recording, and I'm sitting here at the cheap hotel desk here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I don't have my studio. I don't have my good mic that I normally use, and I'm using like a SM58 knockoff, and I was way too close. I'm used to being really close on the mic. I'm used to going through compression. I'm used to having all the Photoshop, if you will, done on my voice. And I was like, man, it's kind of a similar thing to these models, right? It's like you're watching sausage get made, and I'm hearing the peas popping, and I'm hearing myself breathing like I've got emphysema or something. Anyway, I met a lot of people here at Podcast Movement who are worried about their voice, and that's keeping them from doing podcasting. And I was listening to that, and I was going, oh, yeah, I can see why you'd be worried about your voice if you were recording in that way rather than going through all the audio trickery that we use. Don't let that keep you from getting your message out. I mean, it's a risk for me. It's weird because I'm telling a lot of people about this podcast, and a lot of new people are coming in. I'm thinking like, oh man, is this going to be my first impression? Well, maybe so, but hopefully people will stick around. This isn't what it normally sounds like. And if you're wondering why my voice sounds a little bit different, not only is it the microphone that I'm using and the lack of compression and the lack of audio trickery, it is because I woke up this morning about 7 a.m., and right now it is 6 minutes until 3 a.m., and I left the hotel bar. I wasn't drinking. I was talking, which is why my voice is shot. I was listening. I was making connections. Let me give you a rundown of today's review. I'm also going to let you know about Podcast Movement for next year, because they just announced that. I'm going to give you an update on that if you're not aware of it. There's something called PMX, and PMX, I guess they, maybe named that after TEDx, a similar name. I don't know what it stands for, Podcast Movement something. And it's kind of like an open mic. It's open speakers. You do have to sign up, but the speakers are not curated in the way they would be for the normal Podcast Movement. All day long, or most of the day, let's say 6 hours long, presentations, maybe 10, 15 minutes. Went there. I enjoyed it when I was here 3 years ago at Fort Worth, Texas. And it is a great way to get an idea of who is here at this event that you want to meet. And I saw a lot of people doing some very interesting things with podcasting. A woman from New York Library System is trying to get people interested in the library. She's doing a podcast for her branch. They have, I think she said 95 branches, maybe more. Maybe it's, I don't know, there's a lot of branches in this system that she's in, and she's going to teach other people how to do podcasting so people can be more informed about reading and more informed about what's happening with the library. There was a primer, as people say, or primer, as I say, for new podcasters today. Most of my day, though, was spent just hanging out. As I mentioned, it's about 3 a.m. now at this point, and I met some great people. I met a couple guys from Apple, met a guy from Vox. These are the guys that I just ended up with. Stand-up comedian, film producer from Los Angeles. Another guy who is doing 4 million downloads per month with his podcast, and these guys are just hanging out. And I was hanging out with them. It was funny the way I ended up talking to all of those guys. I thought I was closing this thing down probably at 12:45 or something. I was the only guy, was me and one other guy, on the fifth floor of the conference room. And anyway, so we were the only two people on the floor. And I said, I'm closing it down. And I told everybody here on Build a Big Podcast that you got to be the one to close it down. Went down to the bar on the way out of the hotel, and more people are there. So I didn't plan to stay this long, but good conversation. When you've got a guy who's getting 4 million downloads per month with his podcast, you want to know how he's doing it. And it's a fascinating story, which maybe we'll have him on. He can tell you that. So lots of flights that were delayed coming into Philadelphia today, lots of canceled flights, lots of people who weren't here who should have been here. I guess they're going to be here tomorrow. We'll see. Will they be canceled again, delayed again? Maybe so. The highlight, unfortunately, was meeting people. And I was texting one of my buddies in Nashville. I said, you didn't really miss anything as far as the content goes. I mean, it was okay, but it wasn't like the hardcore content that's coming up. But you did miss hanging out with people. And he's like, oh, man, that's what I do the best. That's what I love to do. So anyway, you got opportunities for the next 3 days here at Podcast Movement. I'm looking forward to it. It has been a good event so far, and I will send you an update every day on this. So thank you for being here. And if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do that. Search for Build a Big Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google, wherever you get your podcast, and I will send you these updates via your feed automatically. You don't even have to ask for them. I'll send them, and I will see you on the next episode. All right. I'm back. I forgot to tell you about Podcast Movement for next year. So Podcast Movement has announced where they will be next year and the date, August 13th through 16th. So that's August 13th through 16th, 2019. And the city, Orlando, Florida. So if you are interested in attending Podcast Movement next year, it's in Orlando, home of Disney. Can't go wrong there. So if you don't like Podcast Movement, just go over to Disney. You like that. But you should do this, especially if you're good at hanging out and talking to people. I don't know what the content is going to be like, but if the people are anything like I've experienced so far this year, I think that you're going to want to be here. So Podcast Movement Orlando, August 13th through 16th, and that will be in Orlando. See you on the next episode.